Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Joe Taylor. This morning, another in the ongoing series of programs presented by the Regional Early Learning Resource Center. The program, through the Northwest Institute of Research, oversees a grant from the Office of Child Development and Early Learning at the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services and the Department of Education. The goal of the program is to improve the outcomes for young children as they prepare for school. John Posa from the Early Learning Resource Center is the host of the program and is with us throughout the series. Well, good morning, John, and who do we have on the line this morning?
Oh, Joe, good morning. I am so pleased to welcome Margie Whitmer from Fred Rogers Productions in Pittsburgh. Margie served as the producer of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and was a close friend and associate of Fred Rogers for a number of years until production ended in 2001. But she is still producing through Fred Rogers Production, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and several other works that she is well known for. So welcome to the program, Margie.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Finally get a chance to have you on the program. And tell us a little bit, first off, about, Fred Rogers Productions as a whole in carrying out and what they do to carry out Fred's legacy and his work.
Well, I think we thought it was very important to do that because it took Fred a long time to establish who he was and what he was about. And so the longevity has proven that his theories, his hard work in regards to children and children and families really, and their healthy emotional and social development has really taken flight lately. So that we realized that what he had to offer to young children and their families through television and through media was very important. So we worked hard to find ways to continue that through Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood specifically, but also our other two shows, The Odd Squad and Pig Plus Cat. Even though they are math shows, the approach is about teamwork, and there are some social emotional elements in those shows as well, even though their focus is really math.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
and I mean, we will try to do that through. We have lots of other projects in development, and all of those have that social emotional level of involvement in their creation.
Right, and that's so critical. And you're actually the company's liaison with PBS's Ready to Learn initiative.
Now, I was in the past. I'm not
were
anymore,
before,
but yes, I have worked with individual stations to do some community outreach in terms, particularly of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and what we had to offer.
Right. Well, this has been, there's been several celebrations and projects that have taken place because it was the 50th anniversary for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the television show, when it first aired, throughout the country back in 1968. And, of course, there was the documentary that was done on Fred Rogers. There was his biography, which was released, as well as an up-and-coming feature film with Tom Hanks that'll apparently be released in the fall. But you were mentioned quite prominently. I read the biography on Fred, and you were mentioned quite prominently in that book because you worked very, very closely with Fred in producing the show. Tell us a little bit about what your relationship was and how the inner workings of producing The Neighborhood went.
Well, I have to say that I worked closely with Fred, but Fred was a very private person, and he was really the shy Daniel character in the show, so that I had an intimate working relationship with him. But once he left the office, his life was his life, and it was very separate from his work life. But my job primarily was to help him get what he wanted to have for this program. I mean, that's basically if you did a broad definition of what a producer does, it's do whatever you can to get it done.
Right.
So he would write the scripts, we would talk about. I mean, he would write the scripts, and I would read them, and I would I would analyze the script and I would make notes about, okay, we need this. Where am I going to find a crayon factory where we can go make a film about crayons? Or I would look at, I would get in touch with all of the actors that we needed, and we would, we had kind of a regular schedule. We would produce in the fall, in the early winter, and in the late spring. And so I would make sure that all of the actors were available. If we had to change our production schedule, I would work with the art crew if we needed new props, new costumes. I was kind of just, it's like an event producer, or an event coordinator. I would try and take care of all this detail work to make sure that everything came together, so that, once a week during production, we would have a meeting with the art crew, and we would go through the props, and he would okay them, or we would say, gee, we really need something that's a little bit different. Let's have something different for the next meeting. Or I would go on location when we would go visit with neighbor. Sometimes he would go and visit somebody like Eric Carle, the children's book author, or
right.
a potter, or a musician.
Right.
So I would make sure those happened, and I would be there with him. And then in the studio, it was when we did the studio stuff, it was just making sure everybody was doing what they were supposed to do. And in some instances, we did have some visitors to the studio. Fred would be much more interested in talking to the kids than getting busy, getting down to work. So
right.
it was me herding him away from in a gentle, diplomatic way, to get busy, to protect him from. He would have talked to those kids forever.
Right.
So it was kind of being the herder, the protector as well.
The focus of John's show, of course, is early childhood learning. With all of the nostalgia and excitement in the anniversary about Fred Rogers and the documentary and the movie, what do you think was Fred's most important and lasting contribution to early childhood learning?
I think it was that he spent the time to understand kids, and what made sense to the kids were what his focus and his mission in life were about. That who is our audience? We need to respect them. I need to figure out what they need to hear and what they need to do. He monitored child development classes.
Yes.
At University of Pittsburgh, and he met weekly with a woman named Dr. Margaret McFarland, who was instrumental in really getting out to the world child development, and that he would say to her, I want to do a show about this. Tell me the child development principles, and then let me think about how to translate that so that young children and their parents, if they're watching, and we always hope that the parents would be able to watch with the kids, understand what he's trying to get. How do I help kids modulate their anger so that they understand it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to hurt somebody, something like that.
Right.
So I think that the fondness for him has really blossomed now, because the people who watched Fred as little kids and loved Mr. Rogers now really understand that documentary really helped them understand the care that he put into every single script.
Yes,
and that those kids were, that's what was most important.
Yes.
Clearly we didn't get new sets. Clearly we didn't have expensive puppets, because it was the message that was the most important to him.
Absolutely. In reading the book on his life, I was, really fascinated by the fact that even in the middle of production at times, putting together a show, he would constantly he would actually, even on foot, go back and forth, wanting to meet Dr. McFarland about something specifically that was going to be incorporated in the theme of that show, to make sure he got it right. And would actually, I guess she had an open door policy in her office, and they met frequently, and he came back. I found that very fascinating, because he just wanted to get it just right in terms of the actual value of early childhood development. Now in translating that back to your work, in helping to produce Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. What are some of the things that that you look at, or what's when that's produced in terms of the value of the lesson learned in child development? Do you consult with others, or what takes place in preparing that program?
In Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
Oh, Daniel Tiger's.
Yeah.
Well, there's somebody on staff here named Hedda Sharapan who has been with the company since the show started.
Right.
And she was a young graduate student in psychology, in psychology, and she thought she might want to do television. So he said, get your master's in early childhood development. So she has, over the years, she worked on the show in the beginning, and she said, I was going to classes in the daytime, and when the show first started, they had to churn out a bunch of them. So they taped at night. And Fred would write in the day, spend time with his family in the daytime, and then they would tape at night. And she said, I was in school learning all this complicated child development theory, and I was seeing it played out that night in the script. So that she is invaluable to this company. We also have a couple of outside experts that between the three of them, we get really accurate information. And so when we get the scripts from New York, we go through them and, we make notes. And as a matter of fact, when I'm done with this phone call, I'll be going into a script meeting with some new scripts to, talk about, well, that's not quite right. I think this is the way the kid would look at it, or, to tweak it so that when it finally comes into production, we always want to let the creative juices do their job and just give them little tidbits that might make it a little bit more relevant to the kids watching, so that it's a night. We've come over the past few years to really have a good relationship, so that with the writers, so that I think for the most part everybody's really happy when it comes to when we finally see the show put together in total.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who may not be familiar, I'm sure most of our listeners do, but Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood is an animated program for children, and you produce what's called the live action interstitials for the program. So you're going to have to explain to me, because that word is new to me, and what an interstitial is.
It's basically a short film.
Okay.
It's like a break.
Okay.
I think the word came about because particularly PBS used to do, and still does, little pieces between programs. And so this instead is part of the program. I just wanted to say, and I will answer the rest of this question, but getting back to how we prepare the scripts, also, which we didn't do before, but we test these scripts with kids. They test them in New York with preschoolers to see in the early stages what things they understand, what things they get, what they like, what they don't like, so that then in one of the next versions of the scripts, the research is included to maybe change some of it.
Right.
That's something we didn't do for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So I wanted to make sure you understood that we also did that, because that's what a lot of programs do now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, anyway, back to the interstitials. So they are little live action pieces that are 1 minute and 40 seconds, and sometimes they connect directly with the strategy of the program. So it's a half hour. There are 2 animated stories based on the same theme and strategy. Every episode has a strategy song that we hope kids will learn and sing to themselves when they find themselves in a situation. For example, if you feel so mad that you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4.
Right.
They'll use those in life.
Right.
And sometimes the interstitial is what we call a sweater kid visit, which is a shout out to when Fred Rogers used to go visit interesting people and places. And so it's a lot shorter, but it's a child in a red sweater going to see how pizza is made, or visiting a bunny farm, or, just interesting things that in some way tie in with the half hour. Sometimes it's merely Daniel was making a love-shaped pizza, and so we decided, that would connect because it's pizza.
Yeah.
But it's not just some random sweater visit that has nothing to do with the show.
Right.
Something I've wondered about for, I guess, 50 years on, given the pace of what children see on their devices and screens, so much faster than the slow pace of Mr. Rogers, would the show, if it were launched today, be successful? And are there situations where little kids today watch the original shows? And if so, how do they respond to that slow pace?
Well, that's a lot of questions. I think that if Fred tried to pitch this show today, nobody would want it. And he even said that at one point, that they wouldn't understand it. But I do know that with the popularity of the documentary, the adults who grew up with it have been trying to find Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood for their kids, and when they have shown it to them, the kids have liked it. I think that kids need that break, and we thoughtfully, deliberately paced Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood to be slower than a lot of the kids' shows. That even though it's animated, it's slower paced. So that, where am I going with this? Sorry.
Well, I was going to say that in doing that with Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, you're really honoring Fred as well, not only with the character and the concepts, but in really respecting what the neighborhood was all about from the beginning.
And I think that Fred used to say the outside world has changed, but we all are human, and so our basic human needs, like wanting to be loved and accepted and learning how to interact with people and be empathetic and manage our feelings, those are all basic needs that don't change. So that his messages are evergreen. And so, Amazon offers streaming of episodes. We just now have a new website, part of our website, that is called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And so you'll be able to get episodes of the show. Every other week they offer 5 new episodes so that people can watch them if they want to. PBS has some that they offer, so that it's available for those parents and grandparents who remember Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and want to share it with their kids and grandkids.
We're talking with Margie Whitmer of Fred Rogers Productions in Pittsburgh. Of course, Margie was the longtime producer of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood with Fred Rogers for the 50 years that it was on the air. Margie, I wanted to ask you, are you still involved with the this picture book series?
No.
Okay.
No, that was those 2 series came and went.
Okay. Maybe you might want to talk about it. That one was called First Experiences, and the other was Let's Talk About It. Were those the 2? Yeah.
Yes. Well, at some point, it was decided that we needed to do some books for kids about first experiences, because we as adults forget that going to daycare is a traumatic experience for a kid. Going to a doctor, going to the dentist, even learning how to make new friends. All of those, every experience a kid has to be a new one at first. So Fred was really so sensitive to stuff like that. And so we decided that it would be great to do it with photographs, so that kids like to watch other kids. And so being able to work with a photographer and show kids in those same situations that the reader himself or herself would be in, it made a lot of sense to us. And it was, both series were, particularly the first experience ones, were very successful.
Right. Now I know you're a native of Clarion, and which is Northwest Pennsylvania, not far from where we actually record here in Du Bois. I'm going to take you back a little bit because I think there will be some local folks that would probably want to know how you got involved with Fred, because I know you went to Chatham College and you got a teaching certificate. So let me guess, were you originally planning to become a teacher? And
I was. I wanted to be a third grade teacher.
So tell us what happened, and did you start being a teacher? How you got involved with Fred Rogers?
Well, here's what happened. When you're a senior at Chatham, and I think this is still true, you have to do a senior tutorial. So another college friend and I, another student and I, decided to write a children's book about women in history. So we picked 8 women of the 20th century. Well, our senior year, the first semester went by and we hadn't started it. So in Chatham, the way the semesters are set up, or the way the year is set up, it's a semester, a fall semester, a January, it was called an interim. And so you could either do an independent study or take one class only. And then there was the third semester. Well, my friend, who was working with me on this, started college at Boston College or Boston University. She wanted to be with her friends that January. So we had to work on this book. So there was this program at the public station there called Zoom, and they offered internships. So she and I went up, and we worked at GBH during the day, and then we worked on the book at night. Well, when I got back from we came back, we graduated, we finished the book. I was looking for a teaching job, and at the time I was a mother's helper with this family that I babysat for all through my college years. She said, "Why don't you go down to WQED? They're looking for people. You have television experience." Well, I didn't really have television experience because the show Zoom was about kids sending in their ideas for a program, and then Zoom would do them or not do them. So we sat in the mailroom and read these ideas and then kind of, put the ones aside that we didn't think were good and gave the other ones to the producers. So I didn't really know that much about television. But long story short, I got hired to work on a series that WQED did called When to Say When, and it was about alcoholism, and they were doing a Pennsylvania component that included all of the public television stations in Pennsylvania. So they hired me to do that. Well, that was only for 6 weeks, and then it grew into 6 months. And so I really started working down the hall at WQED. And again, a long story short, I did some freelance work for the Fred Rogers Company, and at the time it was called Family Communications, and I thought, boy, if I could ever work on this show, that'd be great. A few years later, that opportunity happened.
That all came
so
about.
That's kind of how it worked out.
Wow, you've got an interesting story to tell, Margie. And, our time has run out. Well, I wanted to thank you for all the work that you do for Fred Rogers Production, and especially for children. So I think Fred would be really honored with all of the work that you do. So thank you so much for being on the program, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
And that's our program for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks at this same time. In the meantime, you can go online to learn more at papromiseforchildren.com. For John Posa and the Early Learning Resource Center, I'm Joe Taylor. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.